The morning Eleanor Rowe realized she had nowhere left to go began like any other. Quiet, gray, and deceptively ordinary. Rain traced thin veins down the kitchen window, blurring the outlines of the neighborhood she had once memorized by heart. She stood at the counter with a chipped mug warming her hands, listening to the low hum of a refrigerator that wasn't hers, in a house that had never truly been hers either. And for the first time in 59 years, the word home felt like a story she had heard once and forgotten how to finish. The smell of burnt toast lingered faintly in the air, mingling with the sharp bitterness of coffee. And somewhere down the hall, a door slammed, sharp, deliberate, final. That sound landed in her chest heavier than any shouted insult ever could, because it carried intention, it carried decision. Eleanor had spent most of her life believing that love was something you earned through endurance. You stayed, you bent, you gave, until there was nothing left to give, and then you smiled and found a way to give more. She had learned that from her mother, who worked double shifts without complaint, and her late husband Thomas, whose quiet strength had made sacrifice feel noble instead of tragic. Together, they had raised their daughter, Claire, in a modest house on the outskirts of Millbrook, painting walls themselves, planting trees that grew alongside their child, building a life that felt sturdy enough to survive anything. Or so Eleanor thought. Cancer proved otherwise. It hollowed Thomas out piece by piece, leaving behind silence where laughter used to live and an ache that settled permanently beneath Eleanor's ribs. After the funeral, after the casseroles stopped arriving and sympathy thinned into awkward avoidance, she sold the house because staying felt like suffocating inside a memory that refused to fade. Claire had offered her the spare room, or at least Claire had said the words. Her husband Mark had barely looked up from his phone when Eleanor arrived with 2 suitcases and a box of photo albums. He had nodded once, the way people acknowledge deliveries, not guests. Eleanor told herself it was temporary. Everything was temporary, she reasoned. Grief, inconvenience, discomfort. She folded herself into that belief the way she folded her clothes, neatly, quietly, taking up as little space as possible. She woke early to make breakfast she rarely ate, cleaned rooms no one noticed, and learned the rhythm of a household that did not include her in its heartbeat. Mark's irritation showed up in small ways at first, the television volume abruptly rising, cupboards slammed harder than necessary, sighs thick with meaning. Claire noticed, Eleanor knew she did, but she never said anything. Silence became the family language. That morning, the silence broke. "You can't stay here anymore," Mark said from the doorway, his voice flat, rehearsed, as if he'd practiced saying it without emotion. Eleanor turned slowly, mug trembling in her hands, and looked at Claire, who stood behind him with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second before Claire looked away, fixing her gaze on the floor like a child caught doing something shameful but unwilling to admit it. The rain outside seemed to grow louder, drumming insistently against the glass as Eleanor waited for her daughter to speak, to laugh it off, to correct him. Claire didn't. Instead, she exhaled shakily and said, "We talked about this, Mom. It's not working." The words landed wrong, heavy and insufficient, like trying to bandage a broken bone with tissue paper. Eleanor nodded, because that was what she had always done when things hurt. She nodded and absorbed the pain, believing it would make things easier for everyone else. She didn't argue, she didn't cry. She simply set the mug down carefully, afraid that if she didn't, it might shatter, and with it, whatever composure she had left. Mark stepped aside, already done with the conversation, and Eleanor walked past him down the narrow hallway toward the room she had occupied like a ghost. She packed slowly, methodically, folding sweaters she hadn't worn, placing photos back into their box without looking at them, zipping her suitcase closed with hands that felt detached from her body.
When she emerged, Claire stood near the front door, keys in hand, eyes red but dry. They didn't hug, they didn't say goodbye properly. Eleanor stepped outside, and the door clicked shut behind her with a finality that echoed louder than thunder. She stood on the porch for a long moment, rain soaking through her coat, staring at the door as if it might open again if she waited long enough. It didn't. The street was empty, slick with water, the world moving on without noticing that something had just ended. Eleanor walked until her legs ached, dragging her suitcase along cracked sidewalks, until she reached a bus stop bench and sat down heavily. The cold crept into her bones, settling there like it intended to stay. She checked her phone. No missed calls, no messages. She thought about the years she had spent saving for Claire's education, the nights she stayed up so in costumes, the weekends sacrificed to soccer games and science fairs. She wondered when love had become conditional and what rule she had broken without realizing it. By nightfall, Eleanor found herself in a roadside motel with flickering lights and threadbare carpets, a place that smelled faintly of bleach and old secrets. The clerk barely glanced at her as he slid the key across the counter. Room 214, second floor, no elevator. She hauled her suitcase up the stairs, one step at a time, each one a reminder of how tired she had become. Inside, the room was small and impersonal, the kind of place meant for people passing through, not staying. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the opposite wall, listening to distant traffic and the muffled sounds of other lives unfolding behind thin walls. The loneliness pressed in on her from all sides, thick and unrelenting. She didn't sleep much that night. Memories surfaced uninvited, replaying themselves with cruel clarity. Thomas laughing in the kitchen, Claire at 8 years old running into her arms, the warmth of belonging she had taken for granted. Sometime near dawn, Eleanor arose and opened the box of photos, hoping to find comfort in the familiar faces. At the bottom, beneath yellowed snapshots and folded letters, she found a small notebook she didn't remember packing. Its cover was worn, the leather soft with age. Her mother's handwriting filled the first page. Eleanor's breath caught. She hadn't seen the diary in decades. With trembling fingers, she turned the page, unaware that the words waiting there would upend everything she believed about herself, her past, and the future she thought had been taken away from her. Outside, the rain finally stopped, but inside that quiet motel room, a storm was only just beginning.
Eleanor did not read the diary all at once. At first, she only skimmed it, as though afraid the words might burn her if she lingered too long. Her mother's handwriting, elegant, slightly slanted, unmistakable, pulled her backward through time with a force that left her breathless. The entries began innocently enough. Notes about grocery prices, the neighbor's barking dog, sermons she liked and ones she didn't. Ordinary life preserved in ink. Eleanor almost closed the book, comforted by the familiarity, until a single sentence snagged her attention like a hook beneath the skin. He came again today. We spoke only briefly, but my heart hasn't stopped shaking. Eleanor read it twice, then a third time, her pulse quickening. Her mother had never spoken of anyone like that, not after Eleanor's father died when she was small, not ever. The motel room felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Eleanor sat cross-legged on the bed, the diary resting in her lap like something alive, and turned the page. The entries changed subtly at first, then unmistakably. Mentions of secret meetings, of longing held in check, of a man who could not be named because his life was already built, already claimed. Initials appeared again and again, R.L., written carefully as if even on paper he required discretion. Eleanor's chest tightened as understanding crept in, unwelcome and undeniable. Her mother had loved someone else, loved him deeply, and as Eleanor continued reading, the truth emerged in fragments so intimate they felt almost invasive. A child born of that love, protected by silence,
raised without ever knowing the full story. She must never know, her mother had written more than once. Knowing would only burden her. Eleanor closed the diary, hands shaking. The hum of the Motus air conditioner filled the room, loud and mechanical, grounding her in the present as her mind reeled. Her entire life, she had believed herself to be the product of a simple, if short-lived, marriage. Her father gone too early, her mother brave and alone. Now, the foundation of that story cracked open, revealing something far more complicated beneath. She felt anger first, sharp and hot, followed quickly by grief, not just for the deception, but for the woman her mother must have been, carrying a love she could never claim, protecting a child with silence rather than truth. She returned to the diary again that evening, compelled despite herself. This time she read more carefully, tracing patterns, dates, emotional shifts. Then she found the entry that changed everything. He promised that if anything ever happened, she would be taken care of, her mother had written. Not publicly, never publicly, but enough so she would not be left with nothing. His attorney knows, if the worst comes, she is to say my name and his initials. That will be enough. Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. Taken care of? Attorney? This wasn't just confession, it was a lifeline hidden in plain sight. The name of the attorney appeared several pages later, written smaller than the rest, as if her mother had hesitated even then. Samuel Whitaker. Eleanor whispered it aloud, tasting it, letting the sound settle. She had never heard the name before, but something in her gut told her this wasn't fantasy or wishful thinking. Her mother had been practical to the end. She wouldn't have written this if it wasn't real. Still, doubt gnawed at Eleanor as she lay awake that night, staring at the stained ceiling. What if it was nothing? What if chasing this truth only reopened wounds she didn't have the strength to face? The next morning, Eleanor walked to the motel's tiny business center, a narrow room with one outdated computer and a flickering fluorescent light. She hesitated before sitting down, her reflection briefly visible in the dark screen. Tired eyes, graying hair pulled back too tightly, a woman who looked older than her years. Then she typed the name. It took several searches, several dead ends, but finally, there it was. Samuel Whitaker, estate attorney, semi-retired, office located 2 hours away in Brookhaven. Eleanor's hands hovered over the keyboard. Calling felt too immediate. Instead, she wrote an email, careful and restrained, explaining who she was, who her mother had been, and what she had found. She didn't mention money, she simply asked if he would be willing to speak with her. Days passed without a response. Eleanor filled the time by applying for jobs she knew she wouldn't get, walking aimlessly through unfamiliar streets, and rereading the diary until its pages felt worn thin with meaning. The silence from Claire stretched on, heavy and unbroken. It hurt more than Eleanor wanted to admit. Every unanswered message felt like a small confirmation of what she feared, that she had been loved conditionally, and now the conditions had changed. On the 5th day, her phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Eleanor answered with a hesitant hello, her heart pounding. The voice on the other end was older, measured, carrying a note of surprise that quickly softened into something like recognition. "Eleanor," the man said slowly, "I've been expecting this call for a long time. I didn't know if it would ever come." Her knees weakened, and she sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, diary clutched to her chest. In that moment, she understood something profound. Her life hadn't ended when her daughter closed the door. It had cracked open, and through that crack, a truth long buried was finally beginning to breathe. The line was silent for a long moment before the man on the other end spoke again. "I assume you've read everything your mother left behind?" Eleanor swallowed hard, glancing at the diary on her lap. "Yes," she whispered. I don't know what to do now." There was a pause, and then he said, "What she left for you is more than just words, Eleanor. It's a responsibility, yes, but also a chance to understand where you come from. If you're willing, I can explain everything." Her hands trembled as she held the phone tighter. You, you mean the part about the child? The one she kept hidden?" His sigh was soft, almost sorrowful. "Yes, that's part of it. But there's more. You need to hear the full story in person." Eleanor booked a train to Brookhaven the next morning, her stomach tied in knots. The diary felt heavier than ever in her bag, as though it were a key to a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. On the train, she read over the entries she'd marked, tracing the lines about RL, the secret meetings, the promises made. Each word felt alive, buzzing with unspoken emotion and unsaid truths. She thought about her mother, the woman who had carried a love too dangerous to name, a life too fragile to reveal. And she thought about herself, Eleanor, the daughter, who had grown up believing the simplest story of her family, only to discover it had layers she couldn't have imagined. By the time the train pulled into Brookhaven, evening had settled over the town like a soft, amber blanket. Eleanor's heart raced as she walked towards Samuel Whitaker's office, a modest brick building with ivy climbing its walls. The door creaked as she entered, and a familiar voice greeted her. "Eleanor, thank you for coming." Samuel Whitaker stood, a tall man with graying hair and kind but wary eyes. He gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit. I realize this will be overwhelming, but I promise you'll understand everything in time." Eleanor clutched the diary to her chest like a shield. "Where do I start?" she asked. Samuel smiled faintly. "We start with her story, and then we will arrive at yours." He opened a file on his desk, pulling out letters, legal papers, and photographs. Eleanor leaned forward, eyes wide, absorbing each detail. She learned about her mother's secret life, the man she had loved, and the child she had protected from a world that might not have understood. Every revelation brought a mix of shock, grief, and awe. Eleanor discovered that her mother's careful planning had ensured that Eleanor herself would one day have the choice to know the truth. The diary was only the first step, a bridge built in ink and emotion to connect what had been hidden with the life Eleanor had always known. Hours passed unnoticed as Samuel explained the arrangements, the legal safeguards, and the personal decisions her mother had made for her future. By the time she left his office, the sky had turned a deep navy, dotted with the first stars of night. Her head was spinning, but for the first time since reading the diary, she felt a strange sense of clarity. She walked slowly through the quiet streets of Brookhaven, thinking about the courage her mother had shown and the new chapter that was opening for her. The secrets of the past were no longer just shadows. They were the foundation for understanding herself, for seeing her mother not only as the woman who raised her, but the woman who loved, hidden and protected, often at great personal cost. As Eleanor returned to her small motel room that night, she opened the diary once more. For the first time, she didn't read it with urgency or fear. She read it with patience, reverence, and a sense of connection she had never felt before. And somewhere between the pages, she realized that this journey, frightening as it was, might also be the beginning of something she had been waiting for all her life, the chance to truly know where she came from and perhaps who she was meant to become. Morning arrived in Brookhaven with a muted light, the kind that makes the world seem both fragile and full of possibilities. Eleanor woke in her motel room to the faint hum of the town stirring outside. The diary lay open beside her, its pages now a familiar weight, almost like a conversation with someone who was absent, yet present. She knew today would bring answers, but she also sensed it would bring questions she wasn't ready for. After a quick breakfast at a small cafe on Main Street, Eleanor returned to Samuel Whitaker's office. He was already there, sorting through more documents. "Good morning," he said without looking up. "I hope you slept well." "I did," Eleanor replied, "though I keep thinking about everything I read last night. It feels enormous." Samuel nodded. It is, and it's only the beginning. What your mother did, what she protected, was deliberate. She wanted you to be prepared when the time came. And now, that time has come. He handed her a thin envelope. Eleanor hesitated before taking it. Her name was written in her mother's delicate handwriting. She opened it carefully, revealing photographs and letters she had never seen. Some pictures showed a little boy with her mother, smiling under the sun. The letters were addressed to her, written in her mother's voice, though Eleanor had never known they existed. Each word carried the warmth and caution of someone who loved deeply but feared the consequences of exposure. "Who is he?" Eleanor whispered, holding up a photograph of the boy with bright eyes, clutching a small wooden toy. Samuel's face softened. "Your half-brother. Your mother kept him hidden to protect both of you. She trusted me to guide you when the time was right." Eleanor's chest tightened. A mix of excitement and fear pulsed through her. A sibling she had never known, a part of her family hidden in plain sight. Questions flooded her mind. Where was he now? Did he know about her? Was he safe? "We need to be careful," Samuel said gently, reading her thoughts. "He doesn't know yet, and he must discover this in his own time, in a way that keeps him safe. But your mother left instructions. She wanted you to meet him, and she made sure there was a path to do so." Eleanor studied the photographs again. Something in his eyes, the same intensity she had seen in her own reflection, made her feel a strange connection, as if she had known him her whole life. The rest of the day was spent going through her mother's meticulous notes, diaries, and letters. Each page revealed not just the past, but also the careful planning that allowed Eleanor to navigate the truth without shattering the fragile balance of everyone involved. By evening, she felt both overwhelmed and strangely empowered. She realized her mother had not only protected a secret, but had also entrusted Eleanor with the power to shape the future. That night, Eleanor sat by the window of her motel room, gazing at the quiet streets below. She turned over the photographs in her hands again. She imagined the boy, her brother, wondering about her as much as she wondered about him. A plan began to form, one that would honor her mother's wishes, respect the boy's life, and finally allow Eleanor to step into a family she had only ever known in fragments. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose. The diary was the key, but the real journey, the journey of meeting him, of understanding her mother's choices, and of embracing the parts of herself she had never known, was just beginning. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the night wrap around her like a promise. Tomorrow, she thought, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would take the first step into the life her mother had quietly prepared for her, a life filled with love, secrets, and the hope of connection. The morning air was crisp as Eleanor stepped out of the motel, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. She carried the envelope of photographs and letters carefully in her bag, as if the fragile paper contained not just memories, but a roadmap to her future. Her heart beat fast, anticipation tangled with nerves. Today, she would take the first tangible step toward meeting the brother she had only known through photographs and stories. Samuel met her at the edge of town, his presence steady and reassuring. "Are you ready?" he asked. Eleanor nodded, though her stomach churned. "I think so. I don't know what to say to him." "You'll start with the truth," Samuel said simply. "It's the easiest thing to say, even when it feels impossible. Your mother left him a part of her life. He deserves to know that part, and you deserve to meet him." They drove in silence through winding roads flanked by tall pines. Every mile seemed to stretch time, making Eleanor more aware of how quickly everything could change. Samuel finally broke the quiet. "Your mother wanted this to happen naturally. She prepared letters for him as well, so he can learn about you at his own pace. The first meeting doesn't have to answer everything. Just let it be a beginning." When they reached the small town where her brother lived, Eleanor felt a pang of apprehension. The streets were quiet, and the houses had a simple, lived-in charm. Samuel guided her to a modest home with a well-kept garden. "He's inside," he whispered. "Take a deep breath, and remember, this is just the start." Eleanor stepped up to the door and hesitated. She clutched the envelope tightly, feeling the weight of her mother's trust in her hands. When the door opened, a young man looked up. His eyes were a striking echo of her own. For a moment, neither spoke. Words seemed inadequate for the years of distance and mystery that separated them. "Hi," Eleanor said finally, her voice trembling. I think we're family?" Recognition flickered in his eyes, though there was also confusion. "Family?" he repeated. Eleanor handed him one of the letters. "My mother, she wanted me to find you. There's a lot you don't know, but she wanted us to meet. She said, 'You should know me.'" He took the letter cautiously, reading the first few lines. His face softened with understanding, and a small, tentative smile appeared. "I've wondered about you," he admitted quietly. "I never thought." They talked for hours, sharing fragments of their lives, filling in gaps, and discovering strange, unspoken connections. Despite the years apart, there was a natural rhythm to their conversation, a familiarity that neither could fully explain, but both felt deeply. By evening, the tension eased, replaced with cautious hope. Eleanor realized that meeting him wasn't about answering every question or resolving every mystery. It was about presence, recognition, and the start of building a bond that had been carefully nurtured from afar. As she and Samuel left the house, Eleanor felt a mixture of relief and excitement. The first step had been taken. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but now it was shared. Somewhere inside, Eleanor knew that her mother's foresight and care had given them a chance, not just to meet, but to belong to each other in a way that time could never undo. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eleanor felt the quiet thrill of beginnings. Life, she realized, was not just about discovering secrets, it was about embracing them and the people who held them with courage and love. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the soft hum of the town stirring outside her window. The warmth of yesterday's meeting with her brother lingered in her chest, but it was quickly tempered by a new, uneasy curiosity. The letters her mother had left were more than simple introductions. They hinted at secrets, decisions, and relationships that Eleanor had never imagined. Today, she knew, she would begin uncovering the deeper story her mother had left behind. Over breakfast, Eleanor and her brother, Michael, spoke cautiously, circling the edges of the past. He told her about his childhood, the small joys, the unanswered questions, and the sense of absence that had shadowed him for years. Every detail he shared seemed to weave with the fragments of her own memories, like two halves of a puzzle slowly coming together. "I always wondered why Mom never mentioned you," Michael admitted, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "It wasn't just about me finding you. It's about her trying to protect something, or maybe someone. I never understood." Eleanor nodded, recalling the letters filled with cryptic references to unfinished business and things best understood in time. Her mother had been careful, deliberate, and secretive, but she had also been trusting Eleanor to follow the trail. That trust felt heavier now, layered with responsibility and anticipation. By late morning, they decided to visit the small library at the edge of town. Michael had discovered a stack of old letters and photographs tucked away in a forgotten archive, documents that hinted at his mother's complex past and connections Eleanor had never known. They spread the papers across a table, carefully unfolding decades of family history. Names, places, and events formed a tangled web, revealing not just hidden relationships, but also choices that had rippled across generations. This "This changes everything," Michael said, his voice tight. "I thought I knew her, but there's a whole side of her life I never imagined." Eleanor studied a photograph of a younger version of her mother standing beside a man she didn't recognize. The caption was vague, almost coded, but it suggested ties to people outside the family, lives entwined with hers in ways she had never anticipated. A thrill of discovery mixed with a sense of foreboding. Some truths, Eleanor realized, were both illuminating and dangerous. As the day wore on, Eleanor and Michael pieced together the fragments of their mother's past, each revelation deepening their understanding of her and, unexpectedly, of each other. Despite the complexity of the secrets, a shared determination took root. They would uncover the full story, not just for themselves, but to honor the woman who had left them both clues and trust. By evening, Eleanor sat alone in the small garden behind Michael's house. The letters spread around her like a map of hidden worlds. She realized that discovering the past wasn't just about knowing her mother. It was about discovering the strength, courage, and resilience that ran through her own veins. Every secret unlocked was a step closer to understanding who she was and who she could become. And as twilight deepened, Eleanor made a quiet promise to herself. She would follow the path wherever it led, guided by the fragments her mother had left behind and the bond she had just begun to build with her brother. The journey was far from over. It had only just begun. Morning arrived in Brookhaven with a muted light, the kind that makes the world seem both fragile and full of possibilities. Eleanor woke in her motel room to the faint hum of the town stirring outside. The diary lay open beside her, its pages now a familiar weight, almost like a conversation with someone who was absent, yet present. She knew today would bring answers, but she also sensed it would bring questions she wasn't ready for. After a quick breakfast at a small cafe on Main Street, Eleanor returned to Samuel Whitaker's office. He was already there, sorting through more documents. "Good morning," he said without looking up. "I hope you slept well." "I did," Eleanor replied, "though I keep thinking about everything I read last night. It feels enormous." Samuel nodded. "It is, and it's only the beginning. What your mother did, what she protected, was deliberate. She wanted you to be prepared when the time came, and now that time has come." He handed her a thin envelope. Eleanor hesitated before taking it. Her name was written in her mother's delicate handwriting. She opened it carefully, revealing photographs and letters she had never seen. Some pictures showed a little boy with her mother, smiling under the sun. The letters were addressed to her, written in her mother's voice, though Eleanor had never known they existed. Each word carried the warmth and caution of someone who loved deeply but feared the consequences of exposure. "Who is he?" Eleanor whispered, holding up a photograph of the boy with bright eyes, clutching a small wooden toy. Samuel's face softened. "Your half-brother. Your mother kept him hidden to protect both of you. She trusted me to guide you when the time was right." Eleanor's chest tightened. A mix of excitement and fear pulsed through her. A sibling she had never known, a part of her family hidden in plain sight. Questions flooded her mind. Where was he now? Did he know about her? Was he safe? "We need to be careful," Samuel said gently, reading her thoughts. "He doesn't know yet, and he must discover this in his own time, in a way that keeps him safe. But your mother left instructions. She wanted you to meet him, and she made sure there was a path to do so." Eleanor studied the photographs again. Something in his eyes, the same intensity she had seen in her own reflection, made her feel a strange connection, as if she had known him her whole life. The rest of the day was spent going through her mother's meticulous notes, diaries, and letters. Each page revealed not just the past, but also the careful planning that allowed Eleanor to navigate the truth without shattering the fragile balance of everyone involved. By evening, she felt both overwhelmed and strangely empowered. She realized her mother had not only protected a secret, but had also entrusted Eleanor with the power to shape the future. That night, Eleanor sat by the window of her motel room, gazing at the quiet streets below. She turned over the photographs in her hands again. She imagined the boy, her brother, wondering about her as much as she wondered about him. A plan began to form, one that would honor her mother's wishes, respect the boy's life, and finally allow Eleanor to step into a family she had only ever known in fragments. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of purpose. The diary was the key, but the real journey, the journey of meeting him, of understanding her mother's choices, and of embracing the parts of herself she had never known, was just beginning. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the night wrap around her like a promise. Tomorrow, she thought, everything would change. Tomorrow, she would take the first step into the life her mother had quietly prepared for her, a life filled with love, secrets, and the hope of connection.
The next morning, Eleanor awoke to a sharp drizzle tapping against the window, as if the weather itself mirrored the uneasy tension in her chest. She and Michael had agreed to visit an old estate on the outskirts of town, a place mentioned repeatedly in their mother's letters. It had once belonged to a distant relative, someone their mother had described in vague but urgent terms, and both siblings felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension about what they might find. The estate was larger than Eleanor had imagined, its iron gates rusted but still imposing, and the stone facade of the house cloaked in ivy. Inside, the air smelled of age, dust, and faded grandeur. Rooms were lined with towering bookshelves, each containing volumes that seemed to hum with the lives of those who had come before. Michael's eyes lit up as he discovered ledgers, journals, and yellowed letters stacked haphazardly in a corner. "It's like walking into a different time," he murmured, flipping through a journal filled with precise, careful handwriting. "Everything here. It's like she left breadcrumbs for us to find." Eleanor's gaze was drawn to a small, locked drawer in a massive desk. Her mother's handwriting on the envelope inside the drawer made her heart skip a beat. The words were simple, but commanding. "For Eleanor and Michael, truths that must be seen together." The contents revealed a series of letters between her mother and a mysterious figure named Thomas, someone Eleanor had never heard of. The letters hinted at partnerships, promises, and betrayals, suggesting a network of secrets that stretched beyond the family into places Eleanor couldn't yet understand. One letter in particular was marked with urgency. The past cannot remain buried. They must know. Only together can the truth survive. Michael frowned, piecing the puzzle together. Thomas. This isn't just family business, is it? Mom was involved in something bigger, something risky? Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she examined a photograph tucked inside the same drawer, a picture of her mother standing beside Thomas in front of the estate, smiling in a way that suggested confidence and purpose, yet with shadows lurking in their eyes. It was a side of her mother Eleanor had never seen. As they explored further, the siblings found more documents linking her mother to a series of decisions that had protected the family from unknown dangers. Each revelation layered complexity upon the story they thought they knew. Trust, loyalty, and sacrifice seemed intertwined, and Eleanor began to understand why her mother had been so guarded. By evening, Eleanor and Michael returned home, weighed down by the discoveries, but fueled by a shared determination. The day's revelations had changed everything. They were no longer simply uncovering family history. They were stepping into the legacy of choices, courage, and risks their mother had made, a legacy that now belonged to them to understand and continue. Eleanor sat at her desk that night, tracing the letters and photographs with careful fingers. The pieces of the puzzle were forming a pattern, a story of resilience and secrecy that demanded more than curiosity. It demanded action. And deep down, she knew that the most critical revelations were yet to come, waiting to test the bond between her and Michael and the very strength of the family she was only beginning to truly know.
The morning was heavy with mist, curling around the streets like a whisper of secrets waiting to be revealed. Eleanor and Michael set out early, determined to trace the threads hinted at in their mother's letters. Their destination was a small, abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, one repeatedly mentioned in correspondence with Thomas. The letters had been vague, almost cryptic, but the sense of urgency was unmistakable. Someone, or something, was waiting there, and the siblings knew it could hold answers. Or danger. As they approached the warehouse, its rusted doors groaned ominously in the wind. Eleanor's heart raced, but Michael's steady presence beside her provided a necessary anchor. They pushed the doors open, revealing a cavernous interior shrouded in shadows. Dust motes floated in the dim light that filtered through broken windows, and the faint scent of aged paper and machinery lingered in the air. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the far corner of the warehouse. "I was wondering when you two would arrive." A tall figure stepped into the light, revealing sharp features and eyes that seemed to pierce right through them. It was Thomas. Eleanor felt a jolt of recognition, a mix of fear and curiosity. Thomas had been a name in their mother's letters, but seeing him in person made everything feel real, tangible, and dangerous. You knew our mother?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Thomas nodded slowly. "Your mother trusted me with things she couldn't share with anyone else. Secrets that had to be protected because the wrong people knew them, or wanted to know them." He glanced at Michael. "And now, some of those secrets belong to you." He led them deeper into the warehouse, revealing stacks of documents, photographs, and artifacts carefully preserved over decades. Maps marked with obscure symbols, coded messages, and letters to unknown recipients hinted at a network of influence their mother had navigated, connections that spanned far beyond their small town. "Why show us this now?" Michael asked. Thomas's expression darkened. "Because the past has caught up. There are people who still search for these truths. Your mother protected you for years, but the time has come for you to understand everything, to decide how to act." Eleanor's gaze fell on a photograph lying atop a crate. It showed her mother with Thomas holding a small, intricately carved box. The same box had appeared in one of the letters. They had never known what it contained. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. "What is it?" she asked. Thomas hesitated, then said, "It's the key to everything your mother risked her life to safeguard. But it's not just a key in the literal sense. It's a test of judgment, courage, and trust. Whoever possesses it must be ready to face consequences that reach far beyond themselves." A sudden noise from the warehouse entrance startled them all, shadows moving against the light. Eleanor instinctively stepped in front of Michael. "They're here," she whispered, realizing that they were not alone. The figures emerging from the mist were not friends. They were seekers, determined to uncover what their mother had hidden. Thomas's eyes hardened. "Stay close. If you want the truth, you must be prepared to fight for it. And remember, the choices you make now will define everything." As the first of the intruders stepped into the dim warehouse light, Eleanor felt a surge of determination. Fear mingled with resolve. The past their mother had started became their responsibility, and for the first time, Eleanor truly understood the weight of the legacy she and Michael had inherited. The confrontation was inevitable, but Eleanor realized something crucial. They were no longer just reacting. They were ready to take control of their own story. The past had shaped them, but the future was theirs to claim. The intruders advanced cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous warehouse. Eleanor tightened her grip on Michael's arm, her pulse pounding in rhythm with the distant hum of the city outside. Thomas positioned himself between the siblings and the newcomers, his eyes scanning for any sign of weakness. The air was thick with tension. every shadow seeming to twitch with potential danger. One of the intruders, a tall man in a dark coat, stepped forward and spoke with a calm, menacing tone. "We've been searching for that box for a long time. Hand it over, and no one gets hurt." Eleanor's stomach sank. This was exactly what Thomas had warned them about. The legacy their mother had protected for decades had attracted people willing to do anything to possess it. Michael, ever the protector, stepped slightly ahead of Eleanor. "You won't get it. Not without a fight." His voice was steady, though his knuckles were white around his clenched fists. Eleanor felt a swell of pride mixed with fear. Michael's courage bolstered her own. Thomas moved deliberately, pulling a small, worn box from a crate. Its carvings glinted faintly in the dim light, intricate symbols that seemed almost alive. "This is what you're looking for," he said, holding it carefully. "But be warned, it's more than just an object. It carries responsibility, and it reveals truths some would rather keep buried." The tall intruder lunged forward, but Thomas was quicker, sidestepping and keeping the box just out of reach. In the chaos, Eleanor realized she had a choice: stay back and watch, or step forward and assert her own role in this legacy. With a deep breath, she moved toward the box. Her fingers grazed its surface, and immediately a strange warmth spread through her hands, as if the box recognized her. The warehouse erupted into motion, shouts, scuffles, and the sharp metallic clang of objects knocked aside. Michael fought bravely at her side, holding back one of the intruders long enough for Eleanor to focus. The symbols on the box began to shimmer faintly, reacting to her touch. It seemed to hum, resonating with something deep inside her, something she had never understood until this moment. Thomas's voice cut through the noise. "It chooses its guardian. Eleanor, it's responding to you." Fear and exhilaration mingled as Eleanor felt a surge of clarity. The box was more than a key. It was a guide, a test of courage, and a measure of heart. She pulled it close, feeling an inexplicable connection to the mother she had lost, and to the responsibility that had now fallen into her hands. The intruders faltered, their aggression giving way to confusion as the symbols glowed brighter. Thomas seized the moment. "Now, move!" He led Eleanor and Michael toward a hidden side exit, away from the intruders, who now hesitated, unsure how to handle the mysterious power of the box. Outside, the morning mist had thickened, shrouding them in a protective veil. Eleanor held the box tightly, realizing that it wasn't just a physical object, it was a test of judgment, courage, and heart, just as Thomas had said. The intruders had retreated, but Eleanor knew this was only the beginning. They would come back, driven by greed and the desire to control what they could not understand. Michael looked at her, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. What now? Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the weight and promise of the box. "Now," she said, "we learn, we prepare, and we finish what our mothers started." For the first time, Eleanor felt truly ready, not just to follow the path set before her, but to shape it herself. The box pulsed softly in her hands, a reminder that the legacy she had inherited was alive, and that her choices would define its future. The road ahead was uncertain, dangerous, and filled with challenges, but for the first time, Eleanor welcomed it. The morning after their narrow escape, Eleanor sat in the small attic room Thomas had arranged for them. The box rested on the wooden table before her, its carvings glowing faintly in the dim light of dawn. She traced the symbols with her finger, trying to memorize their intricate patterns. It was as if the box pulsed with life, aware of her presence, urging her to understand its secrets. Michael paced back and forth, glancing occasionally at Eleanor. "We can't just sit here forever. Those men will be back, and next time they won't be alone." His voice carried the weight of worry, but also determination. Eleanor knew he was right. They had survived once, but the pursuit would only escalate. Thomas, seated across from her, studied the box with a thoughtful expression. The box doesn't just reveal secrets, it tests the person holding it. Your mother understood that better than anyone. She wasn't just hiding something valuable, she was preparing a guardian, someone capable of making choices that others couldn't. And now, Eleanor, that responsibility is yours. Eleanor swallowed, feeling the gravity of Thomas's words. But how do I even begin? I don't know what it wants me to do. What if I fail? Thomas leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Then you learn. Every choice matters, but the box will guide you. You have to trust yourself and trust it. Start by asking the right questions. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor opened the box. Inside was a small folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age, and a tiny crystal that shimmered with an inner light. She unfolded the paper carefully. Symbols covered its surface, forming patterns she didn't recognize at first, but as she stared, they began to shift, almost like a puzzle coming to life. "It's a map," Thomas said, nodding. "Not of a place, but of a journey. Each symbol represents a step, a trial, or a truth you'll need to uncover. Your mother left it for you not to protect an object, but to prepare you for what lies ahead." Michael leaned closer, curiosity battling with caution. "A journey? What kind of journey?" Eleanor traced the lines of the parchment, feeling a subtle warmth emanating from the crystal. The symbols seemed to respond to her touch, glowing softly. In her mind, images began to form, places she had never seen, faces she didn't recognize, and fleeting visions of her mother, young and determined, working tirelessly to guard something far greater than herself. "I think it's showing me the path," said Eleanor slowly. "Not just a path to a location, but a path to understanding. If I follow it, maybe I can discover what Mother was protecting and why it was so important." Thomas nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "Exactly. But remember, the path will test you. It will reveal truths about the world and about yourself. You must be prepared for that." Eleanor held the crystal, feeling its gentle pulse in her palm. For the first time, fear and excitement mingled into a single, focused determination. "Then we start," she said. "We follow the path and we uncover the truth." Michael exhaled, relieved and ready. "Then let's not waste any more time." As the three of them prepared for the journey ahead, Eleanor felt a new strength settle within her. The box, once an object of mystery and danger, had become a guide, a beacon pointing toward the unknown, where answers and challenges awaited. With each step, she knew she would grow closer to the mother she had lost and to the person she was meant to become. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting long rays of light across the city. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Eleanor, Michael, and Thomas, but for the legacy that had been entrusted to them.